Chapter 1. The Meeting. Part 1. The Preparation. Angela sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers and colorful charts. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on her determined face. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, meticulously gathering data on the disparities in funding and resources between her child's school and those in more affluent neighborhoods. As a single mother of two, Angela understood the importance of education and the role it played in shaping her children's futures. Her son, Malik, attended a school that was underfunded and overcrowded, with outdated textbooks and limited extracurricular activities. Angela had witnessed firsthand the struggles that teachers faced and the lack of support for students who needed it most. Today, she would present her findings at the school board meeting, advocating for equitable resources that her community desperately needed. With a deep breath, she reviewed her notes one last time. She wanted to ensure that her message was clear and compelling. Angela knew that she had to speak not just for her children, but for all the children in her community who deserved better. As she gathered her materials, she felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would the board members listen? Would they understand the urgency of her plea? Part 2. The Arrival. As Angela arrived at the school board meeting, she was greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces. The room was filled with parents, teachers, and community members, all gathered to discuss the future of their schools. She took a moment to observe the atmosphere, noting the predominantly white faces of the board members seated at the front. A knot formed in her stomach as she wondered if they could truly grasp the challenges faced by her community. Finding a seat near the front, Angela set her materials on the table, her heart racing. She listened as other parents spoke about their concerns, some advocating for new sports facilities, while others requested more funding for arts programs. Each voice echoed the same sentiment, a desire for better opportunities for their children. When it was finally her turn to speak, Angela stood up, her palms slightly sweaty but her resolve unwavering. Part 3. The Speech. Good evening, everyone, Angela began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. My name is Angela Thompson, and I'm here to talk about the urgent need for equitable resources in our schools, particularly at Lincoln Elementary, where my son attends. As she spoke, she could see some board members shifting in their seats, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Angela continued, detailing the disparities in funding, the lack of access to technology, and the overcrowded classrooms that hindered her son's learning experience. She shared stories of dedicated teachers who were doing their best with limited resources, but who ultimately needed more support to help their students thrive. Every child deserves a quality education, regardless of their zip code, she asserted, her passion igniting the room. We cannot continue to ignore the needs of our community. Our children are not just statistics, they are future leaders, artists, and innovators. Part 4. The Response. As Angela concluded her speech, she felt a surge of hope. She had poured her heart into her words, and for a moment, she believed that change was possible. However, as the board members began to respond, her optimism quickly faded. One member, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, interrupted her. While we appreciate your concerns, Angela, we have to consider the budget constraints we're facing, he said dismissively. We can't just allocate funds without a clear plan for how it will benefit all schools. Angela felt her heart sink. She had anticipated pushback, but the dismissive tone of the board member stung. Other members chimed in, questioning her knowledge and commitment to the school's overall mission. Despite her well-researched points, it became clear that they were not willing to engage in a meaningful discussion about the systemic issues affecting her community. As the meeting progressed, and the board ultimately voted against her proposal, Angela left the room feeling frustrated and disheartened. She realized that her community's needs were often overlooked, not just due to budget constraints, but because of a systemic bias that marginalized voices like hers. The weight of that realization settled heavily on her shoulders as she walked out, determined to continue fighting for her children and their future, no matter the obstacles ahead. Chapter 2. The Aftermath. Part 1. The Reflection. Angela sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly as she replayed the meeting in her mind. The disappointment washed over her like a cold wave, leaving her feeling defeated. She had prepared so thoroughly, yet the board members had dismissed her concerns as if they were inconsequential. The words of a stern board member echoed in her ears. "We can't just allocate funds without a clear plan." She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Angela knew that the fight for equitable resources was far from over. She thought of Malik and the other children at Lincoln Elementary who deserved better than what they were receiving. They were bright, capable, and full of potential, yet their opportunities were stifled by systemic inequities. As she drove home, Angela made a mental note to reach out to other parents and community members. She needed allies in this fight. She envisioned organizing a meeting to discuss their shared experiences and strategize on how to approach the school board again. The thought of uniting her community ignited a flicker of hope within her. Part 2. The community meeting. A week later, Angela stood in front of a small group of parents gathered in the community center. The room was filled with familiar faces, each reflecting a mix of concern and determination. She had sent out flyers and posted on social media, inviting anyone who cared about the future of their children's education to join her. "Thank you all for coming," Angela began, her voice steady as she addressed the group. "I know many of you share my frustrations about the lack of resources at Lincoln Elementary. We need to come together to advocate for our children and ensure their voices are heard." As she spoke, parents began to share their own experiences. One mother, Lisa, recounted how her daughter struggled to keep up in a classroom with too many students and not enough support. Another father, Marcus, expressed his anger over the lack of extracurricular activities that could help engage and inspire their children. The room buzzed with energy as they discussed their shared challenges, and Angela felt a sense of camaraderie building among them. Part 3. The plan. After hours of discussion, the group began to formulate a plan. They decided to create a petition to gather signatures from parents and community members, demanding a meeting with the school board to address their concerns. They also planned to attend the next school board meeting in larger numbers, ensuring that their voices would not be ignored. Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose as they mapped out their strategy. She assigned roles to different parents, encouraging them to share their stories and experiences during the next meeting. Together, they would present a united front, demonstrating that they were not just a few voices but a collective force advocating for change. As the meeting concluded, Angela felt a surge of hope. She had witnessed the power of community and the strength that came from standing together. They were no longer just individuals fighting for their children. They were a movement ready to challenge the status quo. Part 4. The next school board meeting. The day of the next school board meeting arrived, and Angela felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She arrived early, her heart racing as she saw the familiar faces of her fellow parents gathering outside the building. They held signs that read, "Equity for all," and "Our children deserve better," a visual representation of their collective determination. As the meeting began, Angela and the other parents filled the seats, their presence a stark contrast to the previous meeting. When it was time for public comments, Angela stood up, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. "Good evening, members of the board," she began, her voice strong and clear. "We are here today as a united community advocating for the equitable resources that our children deserve. We have gathered signatures from over 100 parents and community members who support our cause." As she spoke, she could see the board members shifting in their seats, their expressions a mix of surprise and concern. Angela continued, sharing the stories of the children who were being left behind, emphasizing the urgent need for change. One by one, other parents took their turn at the podium, sharing their experiences and the impact of the lack of resources on their children's education. The room filled with emotion as they painted a vivid picture of the challenges faced by their community. As the meeting progressed, Angela felt a sense of empowerment. They were no longer just individuals. They were a collective voice demanding change. The board members listened, and for the first time, Angela sensed a shift in their demeanor. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were beginning to understand the depth of the issues at hand. As the meeting concluded, Angela left the room feeling hopeful. They had made their voices heard, and she knew that this was just the beginning of their fight for equity in education. Together, they would continue to advocate for their children. Chapter 3. The Turning Point. Part 1. The Response from the Board. In the days following the school board meeting, Angela and the other parents anxiously awaited a response. They had made their case, But would the board take their concerns seriously? Angela found herself checking her email constantly, hoping for a message that would indicate progress. Finally, a week later, the board announced a special meeting to discuss the issues raised by the parents. Angela felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was a crucial moment. They had the opportunity to push for real change, but she knew that the board might still resist their demands. As the day of the special meeting approached, Angela and her fellow parents prepared diligently. They gathered more data, stories, and testimonials from teachers and students, reinforcing their case for equitable resources. They wanted to ensure that the board could not dismiss their concerns as mere complaints. They were presenting a well-rounded argument for the future of their children. Part 2. The Special Meeting. On the day of the special meeting, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Angela arrived early, her heart racing, as she saw the familiar faces of her fellow advocates. They had all come together once again, united in their mission. As the meeting began, the board members appeared more attentive than before. Angela took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her community's hopes resting on her shoulders. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped up to the podium, her voice steady. "Thank you for allowing us to present our concerns again," she began. "We are here not just as parents, but as advocates for our children's futures. We have gathered more evidence and testimonials to illustrate the urgent need for equitable resources at Lincoln Elementary." She shared stories of students who struggled to learn in overcrowded classrooms, teachers who were stretched thin, and the lack of access to technology that hindered their education. As she spoke, she could see some board members nodding, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern. Part 3. The board's proposal. After several parents shared their stories, the board members began to respond. The chairperson, a woman with a reputation for being tough but fair, addressed the room. "We appreciate the passion and commitment you all have shown. It's clear that there are significant issues that need to be addressed." Angela felt a surge of hope as the chairperson continued. "We are willing to work with you to develop a plan for additional funding and resources for Lincoln Elementary. However, we need your input to ensure that the plan meets the needs of the community." The room erupted in applause, and Angela felt tears of relief welling in her eyes. This was the breakthrough they had been fighting for. The board was finally acknowledging the disparities and was willing to collaborate on a solution. Part 4. The Collaborative Effort. In the weeks that followed, Angela and a group of parents met regularly with the school board to develop a comprehensive plan for addressing the resource gaps at Lincoln Elementary. They worked together to identify specific needs, such as updated textbooks, technology access, and additional support staff. Angela felt empowered as she collaborated with board members, sharing insights from her community and advocating for the children who had been overlooked for too long. The process was not without its challenges. There were moments of tension and disagreement, but Angela remained focused on the goal, ensuring that every child at Lincoln Elementary had access to a quality education. As the plan began to take shape, Angela saw the impact of their collective efforts. The board agreed to allocate additional funding for new resources, and they committed to ongoing community engagement to ensure that parents' voices would continue to be heard in future decisions. Part 5. A New Beginning. The day the board announced the new funding plan was a moment of celebration for Angela and her community. They gathered at Lincoln Elementary for a special event, where the board presented their commitment to improving resources for the school. As Angela stood among her fellow parents, she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had come together to advocate for their children, and their voices had made a difference. The event was filled with laughter, joy, and a renewed sense of hope for the future. Malik, beaming with excitement, ran up to Angela, holding a new book that the school had just received. "Look, Mom, we're getting new stuff for our classes," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Angela knelt down to hug him tightly, her heart swelling with pride. "Yes, baby, we are. And it's all because we stood together and fought for what you and your friends deserve." As she looked around at the smiling faces of her community, Angela knew that this was just the beginning. They had taken a significant step toward equity in education, but the journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to advocate for their children, ensuring that their voices would always be heard and that their needs would never be overlooked again. Chapter 4. The Ongoing Fight. Part 1. Building Momentum. In the months that followed the announcement of the new funding plan, Angela and her fellow parents remained vigilant. They understood that while they had made significant strides, the fight for equitable resources was ongoing. The school board had committed to improvements, but Angela knew that accountability was crucial. She organized regular meetings with the parents to discuss the progress of the initiatives and to ensure that the board was following through on their promises. They created a community task force, which included parents, teachers, and even students, to monitor the implementation of the new resources and to provide feedback to the school board. Angela felt a sense of purpose as she led these meetings. The energy in the room was palpable. Parents were eager to share their thoughts and experiences, and they were committed to holding the board accountable. They discussed everything from the new textbooks to the technology that was being introduced in classrooms, ensuring that every aspect of the plan was being executed effectively. Part 2. The challenges ahead. However, not everything was smooth sailing. As the school year progressed, Angela began to notice that some of the promised resources were slow to arrive. Teachers expressed frustration over delays in receiving new materials, and students were still struggling with outdated technology. During one of the task force meetings, a teacher named Ms. Rivera voiced her concerns. "I appreciate the funding, but we need to ensure that the resources are actually reaching the classrooms. Our students are still facing challenges that we can't ignore." Angela nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. "We need to communicate these issues to the board. They need to understand that the timeline for implementation is just as important as the funding itself." The group agreed, and they decided to draft a letter to the school board outlining their concerns and requesting a timeline for the delivery of the promised resources. Angela felt a renewed sense of determination. They had fought hard for these changes, and they would not let complacency undermine their progress. Part 3. The school board meeting. At the next school board meeting, Angela and several parents stood together, ready to address the board once again. They had gathered data on the delays and compiled testimonials from teachers and students about the impact of the slow rollout of resources. When it was Angela's turn to speak, she felt a mix of nerves and resolve. "Good evening, members of the board. We appreciate the funding that has been allocated to Lincoln Elementary, but we must address the delays in implementation. Our students are still facing challenges that hinder their learning, and we need to ensure that the resources promised are delivered in a timely manner." As she spoke, she could see the board members listening intently. Angela continued, sharing specific examples of how the delays were affecting students' education. "We cannot afford to let our children fall behind. They deserve the same opportunities as their peers in more affluent neighborhoods." Part 4. A new commitment. The board chairperson responded thoughtfully. "Thank you for bringing these concerns to our attention, Angela. We understand the urgency of the situation, and we will work to establish a clear timeline for the delivery of resources. We want to ensure that our commitment to Lincoln Elementary is fulfilled." Angela felt a wave of relief wash over her. The board was acknowledging the issues and was willing to take action. After the meeting, she and the other parents gathered outside, discussing the positive response they had received. "I think they're finally starting to understand how serious this is," Lisa said, her eyes bright with hope. "We just need to keep pushing for accountability." Angela nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with her fellow advocates. "We will. This is our community, and we will continue to fight for our children's education." Part 5. The community celebration. As the school year came to a close, the task force organized a community celebration to recognize the progress they had made and to thank everyone who had contributed to the fight for equitable resources. The event was held at Lincoln Elementary, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement and pride. Families gathered for food, games, and activities, celebrating their collective achievements. Angela watched as Malik and his friends played together, their laughter echoing through the schoolyard. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that they were creating a better environment for the next generation. During the celebration, Angela took a moment to address the crowd. "Thank you all for your hard work and dedication. We have made significant strides in advocating for our children's education, but our journey is not over. We must continue to hold the school board accountable and ensure that our voices are heard." The crowd erupted in applause, and Angela felt a surge of energy. They were a community united in purpose, and together They would continue to advocate for the resources and opportunities that their children deserved. As the sun set on the celebration, Angela looked around at the smiling faces of her neighbors and friends. She knew that the fight for equity in education was ongoing,